What the hell is going on? You didn't make lunch today. My husband abruptly yelled at me over the phone. He seemed irritated that I hadn't prepared his lunch and that I had been away from home. I told him to take care of himself while I was gone, but he retorted, "Look, you're a housewife, right? You skipped your studies to be one, remember?" He didn't seem convinced, making such a big deal about not having lunch for just one day. I was fed up with him. I did all the housework, and he would still take it out on me when things didn't go his way. My mother-in-law stood beside me, a faint smile on her face as she listened to my husband's yelling over the phone. "My name is Emily. I live with my husband Nicholas and our 2 children, Seth and Ray, who are twin boys just 2 years old. Despite the challenges, I'm so happy being the mother of these adorable twins. Raising them is the source of my current happiness." Nicholas is a typical businessman. His family owns a Japanese-style confectionery store in a shopping arcade. I quit my job shortly after our marriage to help my in-laws with their store. I started working there with a light heart, but it turned out to be much busier than I had anticipated. I not only served customers with a colorful selection of wagashi, but I also made my own sweets in the back kitchen. I had to be in the kitchen from early morning to prepare the sweets on time, especially during the busiest times of the year. Even after the birth of my twins, I continued to assist at the store. Sometimes I would stand in the store with my children on my back. Their cries would sometimes carry through to the store even when I was babysitting them away from the shop. Despite all this, my husband was unconcerned about the confectionery business. "Hey, do you still have no plans to take over the confectionery business?" I asked him. We discussed it several times, but Nicholas seems to have no intention of taking over the business. "I'm not taking over the store. I've told you numerous times I'm not going to take over the store. Isn't wagashi so lame these days? The number of people in the shopping arcade is decreasing year by year, and if I take over the confectionery business now, I will have no future." Nicholas had no desire to take over his family's wagashi. Of course, he couldn't take over the store right now because he worked for a larger corporation, but I liked my in-laws' store and didn't want to see it go away. "Are you going to the pachinko parlor again today, Nicholas?" "Sure, of course I am. What I do on my day off is entirely up to me," he replied. On holidays, my husband always went out to play pachinko. He would even get in line as soon as it opened. Despite this, he ignored the housework. I did all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry, as well as the rest of the housework. Moreover, the most important aspect of child rearing was completely left to me. My husband spent his time at his own pace while I was busy with housework, childcare, and the confectionery shop. My in-laws are getting older, and my workload at the confectionery shop is increasing. Fortunately, they were extremely understanding of my situation. "Emily, you help us with the store, and we are very grateful. Thank you so much for everything," my mother-in-law would always say. She is a lovely lady who doesn't fit the typical mother-in-law stereotype. Her gentle and kind smile always warmed my heart. "I really need Nicholas's assistance. He no longer appears to be interested in the confectionery," she explained sadly. My mother-in-law always looked crestfallen whenever we talked about my husband. I suppose she really wants him to take over the company, but her husband refused to agree. "Well, we're lucky to have such a wonderful wife, Emily. We should stop being greedy." My mother-in-law would lavish praise on me. She valued my assistance at the store while I raised my children. When I was at the shop, she and my father-in-law would babysit the kids, which was a big help. My mother-in-law had become my go-to person, someone I could talk to about anything. Of course, she listened to my complaints about my husband. Ironically, the more distant I felt from him, the stronger my bond with my mother-in-law grew. The presence of my in-laws was very reassuring to me. Right now, life felt like a blur. Raising 2 children meant that each day flew by with no time to think about anything else. As the end of the year approached, the confectionery became busier. It coincided with the end-of-year gift-giving season, and we were in transition. After consulting with my in-laws, I decided to stay at home this year and focus on wagashi preparation. I informed my husband, "What? You're taking the kids and staying at my parents' house?" My husband was clearly upset. I explained that I would only be staying for one night to help out on a busy day. "And what about the housework?" he asked, as expected. For my husband, who does no housework at all, this was a serious problem. If I don't do housework for even one day, he gets upset, even during the busy season for the confectionery. "This time, I'll only be away for one night. Can't you be cooperative during that time? It's just a single day, so everything should be fine, right?" If you get hungry, you can prepare some meals. There will be no laundry to do if it's only for one day, I told him, assuring him there was nothing to be concerned about. But he continued to complain. You know what, you're still a housewife, aren't you? I'm telling you again, I'm the family's breadwinner. Who do you think is in charge of feeding our 2 children? My husband began to grumble, and I didn't want to talk to him any longer. Taking action without his permission, I didn't say anything else and took the kids to my in-laws' house without my husband's permission. When I arrived, a lot of work was waiting for me. It was the end of the year and business was brisk at the Wagashia. Orders for year-end gifts were pouring in faster than usual, and my decision to stay and assist was justified. The creation of gift items began with assembling empty boxes, a surprisingly difficult job, especially at the end of the year when hundreds of boxes had to be made for year-end gifts. My in-laws and I divided up the box-making duties. After the first day at my in-laws' house, I was exhausted, but the next day I had to work hard from early in the morning to make wagashi. To prepare for the busy day ahead, I decided to go to bed early. By the time dawn arrived, I had already started working. While the kids were still sleeping, my in-laws and I stayed in the kitchen quietly working on the wagashi. The sun had risen before I knew it, and the fresh morning air signaled a new day. We decided to take a break and eat breakfast. The kids were already awake and ready for their meal. I hurriedly prepared breakfast and served it at the table. They came running up to me, smiling. My in-laws, the children, and I all sat around the table. Just then, my phone rang. It was my husband. What the heck is going on? You didn't make lunch today, he yelled as soon as I picked up. He seemed irritated that there was no lunchbox, which he expected to be available at all times. A shocking proposal. I told him to make his own lunch while I was gone. Had he forgotten? What do you mean, avoiding housework? He demanded, clearly unconvinced. When I suggested he prepare the food himself, he accused me of laziness. What a prick, making such a big deal about not having lunch for one day. He leaves everything up to me, and when things don't go his way, he transforms into this. I was shocked, and my in-laws appeared to be as well. They could clearly hear my husband yelling over the phone. He rambled on about his complaints before abruptly hanging up. Although breakfast had just been served, the living room of my in-laws' house fell silent. My husband lost his cool in such an unreasonable way. Just as expected, the kids seemed to sense the tension and refused to eat their breakfast. My mother-in-law cheerfully said, "Itadakamasu," urging my sons to eat as well, trying to lighten the mood. Then she turned to me and said, "Why don't you divorce my son, Emily?" I froze, my hand hovering over my tea. I never expected my mother-in-law to say something like that. My father-in-law quietly ate his breakfast, an indescribable expression on his face. A turning point. I believe I was a little out of line, but now that you've been told something like that, I hope you've come to your senses, my mother-in-law said, smiling at me. It seems that when someone is truly disgusted, there's nothing left to do but laugh. I feel terrible for you as a mother. You are no longer required to be merciful to my son. Allow your emotions to guide you, she continued. My mother-in-law had probably figured out how I felt about Nicholas by now. She was always supportive and encouraging, and now I knew she was on my side. My father-in-law never spoke much, but he nodded in agreement with his wife's words. Their presence was reassuring, and it was that day that I returned home with a decision made. Later in the evening, my husband came home with a tense expression, clearly still upset about the lunch. I asked him to take a seat because I needed to speak with him. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked, cocking an eyebrow and looking at me. "Sit down," I repeated, ignoring his mood. When he sat down, I held out the divorce papers. I'm going to divorce you, I said, the words slipping out of my mouth. My husband's grumpy expression abruptly changed to one of surprise. "Why did you say divorce so abruptly? Are you kidding me? The kids are still so young." He was in a panic, unable to understand why I was seeking a divorce. He adamantly refused to consider divorce, insisting there was no reason for it. He tried to avoid the discussion by claiming it was invalid. "There's a reason," I said, stopping him from fleeing. I pulled a few photos from an envelope on the table and placed them in front of him. One photo showed my husband walking with a woman, holding hands. "Didn't you say you go to Pachinko on your days off? What exactly is this? You appear to be having a good time," I said. When he saw the photo, my husband's face turned pale. Confronting the truth, I pressed him to tell me what was going on. No, this is, well, he stumbled over his words, trying to make up some nonsense excuse about how she was just an acquaintance. She's a junior employee at your company, isn't she? I said. My husband's movements ceased when I mentioned the identity of the woman in the photograph. He had been having an affair with a younger woman who worked at the same company. I had been suspicious of his behavior and had discussed it with my mother-in-law for some time. She suggested I hire a detective to investigate. The findings of the subsequent investigation astounded me. My husband had entered a pachinko parlor with a woman and then gone directly to her room. I have more photos, I said. You two are very close, so the investigator could take many photos. Would you like to see more? Confronted with undeniable evidence, my husband finally confessed. He admitted that while he was a pachinko fan, he also had a romantic relationship with this woman and had been visiting her room during the day. I'm sorry, Emily, he said. I was just experimenting with fire. I'm sorry for the kids. I'm leaving this girl right now, so please don't divorce me. He was no longer at my mercy, apologizing emphatically. However, I would never forgive him. I'm dead set on getting a divorce. I'm not joking. I've been assisting at your parents' home while babysitting and taking care of things you don't want to do. I've informed your father and mother about this. My in-laws knew everything. Standing my ground, I told my husband that my in-laws were on my side, not his. They both stated they would assist me in any way they could. Since we work together, we've had plenty of time to talk, they explained. We're both furious at you. Of course, I informed them that we were divorcing. My husband completely lost his cool and broke down in tears. Please, I would never do something like this, he muttered, overwhelmed by the situation. He kept insisting he didn't want a divorce, but I was resolute. I can't do this with you any longer, I said. I will make certain you pay alimony and child support. I served him with divorce papers. My husband begged for forgiveness on his knees, but I refused to listen. As a result, we divorced. I insisted on alimony payments from both my husband and the woman he had an affair with. My husband also had to pay child support for our children. After the company discovered their affair, my husband chose to resign, and the woman lost her position. My in-laws were furious and informed my husband he would be cut off from the family and bored from their home. With no one to rely on, he was compelled to work manual labor from morning to night to pay his bills. After the divorce, I continued to work at the Wagashia. My in-laws asked me to stay, and I gladly agreed. I enjoy working in the store and, of course, need to support my children. My in-laws want me to run the store after they retire and plan to eventually give me both the store and their home. Naturally, I intend to take over. I will be the proprietress of the confectionery. I will continue to work hard and raise my children while looking forward to the future. In the hospital for just a fracture. Pause. Acting like a child. You need to pull yourself together. Get up and make dinner, or else. We're done. How could anyone react that way to news of their wife in the hospital instead of expressing worry first? Most wouldn't get it, but this is my husband. I can't handle it anymore. I was at my wit's end, but there was someone even angrier with my husband than I was. That turned out to be his own parents. I wonder how he'll respond when they intervene. I'm Eileen, 29 years old. I landed a job at a well-regarded company right after finishing college, even though I don't work at the main office. My salary's quite good. My husband Matt is 32. We met at a client's office, and after a few meetings, he took the initiative to swap numbers. He later invited me to dinner, and after dating for a year and a half, we took the plunge when he proposed. Looking me in the eye, he said, I want to spend my life with you. Eileen, will you marry me? I'm happy, but are you sure about us? I want you, Eileen. You're the only one who makes me feel truly happy when we're together, Matt. Thank you. I want to spend my life with you, too. We were showered with blessings at our wedding and pledged to love each other forever. But 2 years later, if asked if love still exists between us, we couldn't confidently say yes. The reason is simple. Matt has changed in these 2 years. It started with something small. Since we got married, he began gradually shifting household responsibilities to me. We had agreed to split chores evenly, since we were both working before we got married. Despite this, Matt had stopped doing his share of chores like cleaning the bathroom and washing the dishes. Initially, he would reluctantly do them when I reminded him, but gradually, he stopped doing them altogether, even when asked. This increased my workload. Over time, extra hours at work piled up, eating into my sleep. Exhausted both mentally and physically, I decided to talk to Matt about it. When I got home, he was already lounging on the couch with a beer in hand. He didn't even acknowledge me. Despite my frustration, I approached calmly. "Hey, Matt, there's something we need to discuss." Keeping his eyes fixed on the TV, he replied, "What is it?" I took the remote from his hand and turned off the TV. "Hey, what are you doing?" "I was watching that." My husband jumped up, raising his voice. "I told you I wanted to talk, right? It's important. Please listen." "What a bother. So what's this about?" "I'm not exactly swimming in free time, you know." "Free time? You've been glued to the TV and drinking beer?" Holding back the urge to yell, I kept my cool and pressed on. "Matt, you haven't been pitching in around the house lately, have you?" "Why not? We agreed to share chores since we both work, didn't we?" "Isn't it obvious? Doing housework isn't my job." "What do you mean? Cleaning the bathroom and doing dishes were your responsibilities, weren't they? Why should I, as a husband, have to do that? Those tasks are for women." "Wait, are you serious? You were the one who suggested we split the chores. That was just for show to look like a good husband, isn't it clear? At our wedding, you've even told everyone, I'm so lucky my husband helps around the house. That was the whole point. Haha. So, you're saying you only helped out to improve your image during the wedding?" With a smirk, my husband said, "Exactly." I was stunned by my husband's words, unable to comprehend such audacity. "I'm exhausted from working late too. After getting home later than you, how could you say something like that to me? Just a reminder, you're not exactly a beauty queen, okay?" "What? Why are you bringing this up now? What does my appearance have to do with this discussion? Someone as ordinary as me should be grateful to have married someone like you. You're complaining about simple chores? Know your place." Matt, my husband, shouted and turned on the TV without waiting for my response. He took a sip of his half-empty beer and casually shifted his focus away from me. I couldn't believe it. I'm working late too, so how could he say such things? No matter how I look at it, that's just wrong. I wanted to say a lot, but speaking up now would only lead to a fight. To calm myself, I went straight to bed after taking a bath that night. Since then, I tried repeatedly to talk to Matt, but was always brushed off. Every attempt at conversation was met with, "Don't tell me what to do," leaving no room for discussion. It seemed Matt avoided me, often leaving the house on his days off. Naturally, he neglected housework, even on my days off, leaving me to handle it all at once. Time passed, and as my job entered a busy period, my overtime hours increased significantly. Then Matt exploded again in anger. "Hey, do you know what time it is? Where's my dinner?" Matt started yelling the moment I returned home after a 3-hour overtime shift. "I told you this morning I'd be working late today, so you should either cook or get takeout." "What? Are you serious? Why do I have to cook? I wouldn't mind takeout, but do we even have money for that? Are you going to pay? Why should I? I'm busy too, so can you help out a bit?" The mention of busy seemed to trigger him. He kicked the table leg and snapped at me with a furious look. "I don't care if you're busy. You're always doing overtime because you can't manage your time. It's not that. My workload at work is really heavy right now. Don't act like you're all that just because you can handle a bit of work. You should just do what I tell you, you foolish woman." From that day on, I kept my distance from Matt to avoid his scolding. I prepared dinner ahead of time on days I knew I'd be working late. I also took on all the housework on my days off. Looking back, maybe I should have left him right then and there. But even then, I couldn't bring myself to truly hate him. Living like this, my burden gradually became too much to bear. After 2 months, both my body and mind were exhausted, and I lost my motivation for work. One day, on my way to work, I slipped on the subway stairs and fell. Though I remained conscious, I lay immobile, ripped by pain, and had to be transported by ambulance. Even upon reaching the hospital, the agony persisted, restricting my movement. After completing all the tests, the doctor entered my room and said, "You've fractured your leg and have bruises on your arm and back. You must be in a lot of pain." "Yes, I can't move as freely as I'd like." "You may be in this state for a few days. You look pale. Have you been feeling tired?" Anyway, I'll need to stay in the hospital for a while. Should I inform my family?" "Yes, please do." As I checked my phone, a message from a colleague awaited me. They had witnessed the ambulance taking me away from the subway station. They had already informed my workplace and contacted Matt, my husband. Exhausted from the day's events, relief washed over me, and I drifted into a deep sleep. Hours later, my phone buzzed, waking me up. Matt's name lit up the screen. Perhaps he was calling out of concern. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, I answered, "Hello." "Hey, where have you been? Come home right now." Confused by Matt's raised voice, I couldn't hide my confusion. "Wait, didn't you hear? What's going on?" "I had an accident at the station. I'm in the hospital now. I fractured my leg and they're admitting me." After a brief silence, he exploded. "Are you kidding me? Hospitalized? You're not using this as an excuse to avoid doing chores, are you?" "What? No. Why would I lie about something like this? Didn't the office contact you?" "No calls came through. Even if you're trying to trick me, it won't work. And even if it's true, it's not my problem. Just come back and make dinner, all right?" "What?" "Hold on, Matt." My words were cut off as he abruptly ended the call. How could he be so dismissive? Isn't it normal to be concerned when your spouse is hospitalized? Am I just here for Matt to delegate chores to? Exhausted, I lay back down on the bed. A message from Matt popped up on my phone. "If you're not coming home, I'll order takeout. You're paying." As soon as I read the stark, emotionless message, clarity washed over me. It was foolish to dwell on this any longer. Just as I was contemplating divorce, there came a knock on my hospital room door. When I saw who entered, I couldn't believe my eyes. My father-in-law and mother-in-law? What are you doing here? My in-laws lived far away and hadn't been close to Matt for some time. After we got married, I rarely saw them, maybe once a year at most. Their unexpected presence baffled me. Seeing my confusion, my mother-in-law spoke gently. "Eileen, we heard you were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. We were worried." "How did you find out?" "We received a call from your office." "Huh. But my office tried to reach Matt several times before contacting you. He didn't answer any calls, so they reached out to his childhood home, which was listed as an emergency contact. That's why you're here." Their unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. I was genuinely touched that they had come all this way out of concern for me. Holding back my emotions, I gratefully lowered my head to Matt's parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, thank you so much." "It's all right, dear. We're family. But where is Matt?" You mean he hasn't arrived?" "No." They seemed surprised by my answer. Just then, my phone rang. It was Matt calling. "Hello. What's wrong with you? Are you really not planning to come back?" Matt's sudden outburst caught Mr. and Mrs. Johnson off guard, and they exchanged worried glances. I gestured for them to stay quiet, placing my finger on my lips. They nodded silently, and I responded to Matt. "I've been admitted to the hospital. I won't be able to come home for a few days." "Hospitalized for a fracture. Stop being so delicate. Get yourself out of there and make some food." Mrs. Johnson looked ready to protest, but Mr. Johnson held her back. Matt continued ranting, unaware his parents were listening. "Just so you know, if you don't, we're getting a divorce, okay?" "A divorce? Are you serious?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I be? There's no reason to stay with someone like you who not only lacks attractiveness, but also neglects their household duties. Haha." His laughter over the phone left me speechless, stunned by his callousness. Isn't this going too far? He had always belittled others. I had to respond. "Hey, are you serious saying things like that? Your parents are furious." "What are you talking about? His response was lighthearted, as if he thought it was a joke. I handed my phone to my in-laws and let them take over. They unleashed a fierce reprimand through the phone. "Matt, how could you say such things to Eileen? How can you be so heartless when your wife is in the hospital? We don't even recognize you as our son anymore. You're disowned." "Wait, hold on, it's not what you think. There's a reason for this. There's no excuse for your behavior. All you do is spew venom. I'm ashamed to call you my son. Apologize to Eileen right now." Feeling cornered by his parents, my husband suddenly turned on me. "Eileen, enough. Using my mom and dad like this. Exploiting them. It's your fault for not answering your company's call, isn't it? That's why they had to get involved. They called that number from your office. How misleading. Fine, I'll divorce you. Are you okay with that?" I released all the pent-up anger and resentment, standing my ground. "Divorce? Bring it on. I want nothing to do with a man like you. How long will you continue to think you're above everyone else? I have no reason to stay married to you anymore. If you understand that, never show your face to me again. Get lost, you piece of garbage." Following the divorce from my husband Matt, he initially hesitated, but with the help of my in-laws recommending a divorce attorney, we managed to separate amicably. The divorce brought significant changes to Matt's life. He began eating out for every meal, and his health declined. Unable to manage his laundry, I heard he showed up to work in wrinkled suits and shirts. Consequently, his reputation among coworkers took a nosedive. "Did you hear? He didn't even visit his wife in the hospital. That's pretty messed up." "Well, no wonder she left him. Ha ha ha." Over time, Matt began to skip work without giving any notice. With no one supporting him, it seemed inevitable that he would soon be pushed to resign. On the contrary, I was discharged from the hospital and returned to my usual work routine. Despite now being divorced, my job kept me occupied, lessening the impact more than I had anticipated. Moving forward, if I have the chance to meet someone new, I'll carefully evaluate them to ensure I find genuine happiness next time. "Hey, why don't you come to Mom's funeral, sis?" "What? I never thought you were such a terrible person." I was caught off guard as my younger brother's words pierced through the phone line. His tearful voice held no hint of deceit. "James, Mom passed away 5 years ago, you know." "My name is Jessica," I reminded him gently. "I'm a 30-year-old office worker dating a man named Robert. We're starting to get serious, and he's eager to meet my parents. But there's a weight of guilt pressing on me. Both my parents have passed away, having divorced years ago amidst irreconcilable differences. I was just 16 then. After the divorce, I lived with my father, who cared for me deeply. He supported my piano lessons and studies, and I took on household chores in return, cooking dinner, making rice balls, anything to see his smile of approval. Then came college, where I excelled, much to my father's pride. He encouraged me to visit my mother, who lived with my younger brother James. Big sister Jessica, long time no see. We shared brief moments of joy during those visits. But after my mother remarried, things changed. My husband-to-be wanted me to focus on our life together, which strained my relationship with my previous family. Though I wished them happiness, conflicting emotions swirled within me as I navigated this new chapter of my life. But I don't want to lose the opportunity to see my brother. Can't we just reduce the frequency of our meetings? I'm sorry, but James is entering adolescence and I don't want to confuse him too much. I see, but once we get used to our new life, I'm sure my husband will let us meet. Yeah, I understand. I wasn't entirely convinced, but I didn't want to protest and risk damaging my mother and brother's relationship with their new family. So, I decided to endure it. Years passed. I finished college and landed a job. Yet during that time, I couldn't see my brother or mother. 4 years had gone by, and I couldn't help but wonder why they couldn't spare even a moment to meet me. Perhaps they were leading such fulfilling lives that they no longer needed me. My brother, who was just 11 when we last met, was now 15. I wanted to offer him some encouragement as he prepared for private high school entrance exams. With that thought in mind, I mustered the courage to call my mother. To my surprise, an unfamiliar man answered the phone. "Hello, who is this?" Isn't this my mother's number?" Are you Jessica by any chance?" "Yes, I am. I'm David, the man who remarried your mother. She's busy right now, so I answered the phone." "Oh, I see. Well, it's been 4 years since I last saw them, and I was thinking I'd like to see my brother and mother soon. Really? You haven't seen them? No, I haven't seen them at all. I see. Maybe your mother doesn't want to see you. What? Actually, when I mentioned your name just now, my wife didn't react at all. Is James not around? I at least want my brother to respond to my call. I was thinking that, but James is right next to me. He's just playing a game and not reacting at all. It seems like they've both forgotten about you and adapted to their current lives. They're both living happily, so could you please leave them alone? I'm gonna hang up now, David stated before ending the call. I was left so stunned that I couldn't move for a while after the conversation ended. The thought that my brother and mother might have forgotten about me and were living their lives without me was too much to bear. Seeking solace, I turned to my father for advice. That's strange. Those two love you, Jessica, he reassured me. He tried to reach out to my mother, but her response was firm. Please don't call again. In the end, we couldn't meet or even speak to my mother and brother. Life carried on, and I became increasingly occupied with work. Still, they lingered in the back of my mind. Then, about 3 years after that distressing phone call, I received devastating news. What? Mom? It was a notification informing me that my mother had died in a traffic accident. Rushing to the hospital, I was led to the room where her lifeless body lay. Her peaceful expression made it seem as if she were merely sleeping with her eyes closed. I never imagined I'd see her again like this. Sis, a voice broke through my mourning. James. As I grieved my mother's passing, my brother entered the room. It had been 7 long years since I last saw him, and he had grown into a completely different person. Why didn't you come to see us? He questioned, his tone filled with hurt. Did you start hating me and Mom? Wait a minute, I interjected. It was your stepfather, David, who told me not to see you. Dad would never say something like that, James rebutted firmly. Dad's an amazing person, and I look up to him. He wouldn't say something like not meeting with you, sis. What? My brother's trust in our stepfather, David, was evident. They must have developed a strong bond over the past 7 years. Then, a man who seemed to be David arrived. Hi, it's our first time meeting in person, isn't it? He greeted. Hello. David appeared to be in his early 50s with a determined air about him, as if he could accomplish anything. Despite encountering various company employees in my line of work, he struck me as somewhat cunning. I'm really shocked that my wife passed away so suddenly. The funeral will be held soon, so I'd like both you and your father to attend, Jessica, David informed me. Understood. Though my mind was preoccupied, attending my mother's funeral took precedence. My father and I went together to bid her farewell. The funeral proceeded without incident, but a dispute over the inheritance soon arose. Jessica hasn't seen my wife in 7 years, so could you please give up the inheritance? David proposed. What? Wait a minute, I interjected. Wasn't it David who didn't let me see her? Sis, are you still saying that? How many times do I have to explain that Dad would never do that? James countered. No matter how desperately I pleaded, my brother wouldn't believe me. Oh dear, it seems I've become the villain here, David remarked. Dad's not wrong. Sis is just saying weird things, James asserted. Sis, I don't really understand inheritance, but will you give it up? He pressed. What? I should at least receive the minimum inheritance, right? What would Mom think if she saw you being so greedy about money? I retorted, feeling as though David treated me as if I were money-grubbing. At this point, my father intervened. Wait a minute, my daughter is only claiming her rightful share. Stop making such accusations. Thanks to my father's words, David fell silent. No matter what you say, I'll make sure my daughter gets at least the minimum inheritance. What's this? Are you and Sis conspiring to make things difficult for us? David challenged. That's not the case. This is just a claim of rights, my father clarified. The discussion grew heated, and in the end, I received only the minimum inheritance, but it created a divide between my brother and me. My antagonistic relationship with David, my brother's trusted stepfather, caused this rupture. Finally reconnecting with my brother after so long, only to be met with his disdain, compounded the sadness of losing my mother. As if that weren't enough, more misfortune followed. My father was diagnosed with cancer, given only 1 more year to live. It felt like an onslaught of crushing blows, leaving me asking, why is this happening to me? I spiraled into negativity. But my father, noticing my change, gently spoke to me. Jessica, everyone dies someday. It's not something we can control. I've been happy living with you all this time, and I intend to enjoy the time I have left to the fullest. Dad, in the time that remained, we went on trips and did everything he wanted to do. When he passed away, I was left with an unbearable pain from losing both of my beloved parents. Yet my father's last words echoed in my mind: look forward and enjoy every moment of life. With his words as my guide, I wiped away my tears and chose to move forward. At my father's funeral, my brother arrived, accompanied by David. This presence fueled my brother's aggression towards me, his focus solely on my father's inheritance. Sis, you forcibly took part of Mom's inheritance, so I'm definitely taking Dad's inheritance, he asserted. I didn't want to engage in further conflict or hostility, so I quietly agreed. Yes, of course, I was planning to give it to you anyway, I responded calmly, making arrangements for the inheritance to be transferred to my brother. Since then, I haven't seen or heard from my brother. It felt awkward reaching out to him, and years passed by. Eventually, I met Robert through a friend's introduction. As our relationship progressed towards marriage, I decided to disclose everything to him about the loss of both my parents and the strained relationship with my only sibling, my brother. Despite knowing all this, Robert still wanted to marry me, and I found myself falling in love with him. As our courtship continued smoothly and we received a marriage proposal, I felt like I was on top of the world. But then, in a sudden twist, I received a call from my brother. Hello, James, I greeted, surprised and elated to hear from him after so long. What's up? Oh, speaking of which, I have something to tell you too. However, before I could say anything, my brother interrupted me with an accusation that left me bewildered. Sis, why didn't you come to Mom's funeral? I never thought you were such a terrible person, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. What? I don't think my sister was such a terrible person, I responded, utterly confused by his sudden accusation over the phone. What's going on? Why are you saying something so nonsensical all of a sudden? Nonsensical? Mom's dead, you know? He retorted, his voice filled with anguish. Wait, James, calm down, I urged, struggling to make sense of the situation. How can I calm down? Was this some kind of cruel joke? He questioned, his voice breaking. No, it was too harsh for that, I realized, feeling the weight of the truth in my brother's sobbing voice. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before addressing my brother James. James, Mom died 5 years ago. I began slowly, expecting him to understand. But his response shocked me to the core. What are you talking about? Mom didn't die back then. What? What are you saying? You saw Mom's body too, didn't you? We even had the funeral, I countered, confusion clouding my thoughts. His insistence only added to my bewilderment. No, Mom was alive. I lived with her for about 3 years after that. What? What do you mean? James's voice trembled with disbelief. So, I was living with Mom, I tried to explain, struggling to grasp the situation myself. It's best to go along with the story at times like this, I reasoned, trying to make sense of the apparent disconnect. Yes, but they said she would die soon without an offering. I gave all the money I earned as an offering, James confessed, his voice heavy with regret. Suddenly, it dawned on me that my brother had been deceived. What? At that moment, I realized that my brother had been deceived. But the offering wasn't enough, and Mom died. James, can you introduce me to the person you've been making offerings to? I asked urgently, wanting to understand the full extent of the deception. Of course, you should be saved too, sis, he responded earnestly, leading me to the person who had supposedly rescued Mom. Later, as we entered the office building where counseling was conducted, I felt a sense of unease. Teacher, my brother called out as we stepped into the private office. And there, to my astonishment, was David. Wait a minute, you're the one who remarried my mother and became James' stepfather, right? Why is James calling you teacher? I demanded, my confusion growing. James and I have a patient-teacher relationship, David explained calmly, though his presence only fueled my suspicion. What? No, you live with James, right? James even called you Dad, I protested, struggling to comprehend the situation. Sis, what are you talking about? David is a counselor. Dad died 3 years ago, remember? James interjected, his voice tinged with concern. Wait, David, are you brainwashing James? I accused, unable to shake off the feeling of dread creeping over me. What are you talking about? I've just been listening to him. Before that, I was counseling his mother, David clarified, though his explanation did little to alleviate my growing unease. What? You deceived my mother too? I accused, feeling a surge of anger and betrayal. Sis, don't say such terrible things like deceived, James pleaded, his expression torn between confusion and distress. Jessica seems quite confused. Well, it's understandable. Losing both parents can often lead to mental illness. David interjected, his tone patronizing. What are you talking about? You've unconsciously put a stopper in your mind to avoid facing reality. You're suppressing the grief of losing your parents, he concluded, his words sending a chill down my spine. I can help you release it. Stop it. I'm already looking forward and living my life. Really? Aren't you just enduring it? I'm not enduring anything. It's better not to force yourself. If you do as I say, your heart will feel much lighter. Really? Really? James became cheerful that way too, so why not entrust yourself to me? Yes, please. Good girl. Now, sit here and think about your mom and dad. When I place my hands on your head, the sad feelings will magically disappear. How about it? Do you feel lighter? No, I don't feel any lighter. I see. Maybe it's because the offering is 0, so there is not enough power. What? If you really want to get better, you have to make a lot of offerings. Is that so? Yeah, so let's start with an offering of $1,000. $1,000? That's still not enough to be completely healed. You need to make more and more offerings. Is that so? James made offerings too, right? Yes, he's been making offerings ever since he graduated from high school and started working. That's how he was able to find his mother and regain happy days. But the offerings stopped at one point, and his mother really died this time. So, he's reflecting on that and increasing his offerings to be saved. I see. I called out towards the entrance. That's how it is, Robert. As I said that, the door to the room opened, and my fiancé, Robert, walked in. Who exactly are you? David asked, with a suspicious look at Robert, who then handed David his business card. I'm a lawyer. I've been listening to your conversation, and it seems you've been brainwashing James and swindling a large sum of money from him. A lawyer? He's also my fiancé, and we're going to sue you and recover the money. As I said that, David momentarily looked flustered, but then snorted and retorted, I thought you'd say something like that. James was saved by me. There's no fact that I deceived him. I was just providing legitimate counseling, right, James? David asked my brother with a triumphant look on his face. My brother glanced at us and then said, I was deceived by you and forced to contribute a large sum of money. You, James. David's eyes widened at my brother's statement. It seems your brother intends to sue you. Wait, this must be some mistake, right, James? I saved you. Are you going to betray me like this? Teacher, I do think that thanks to you, both my mother and I felt relieved many times. But it's also true that you were gradually brainwashing us, right? In fact, I became unable to make sound judgments because of you. You brought a woman who looked like my mother and made me believe that she was actually alive. And then, you instilled fear that she would die if I didn't make offerings. Moreover, you disposed of all the photos of my mother and me without my noticing and replaced them with composite photos of a fake mother. The pictures were so sophisticated and natural that I naturally believed the fake mother was my real mother. And before I knew it, almost all of my salary from the years since I graduated from high school and started working was taken by you. When I met my sister and saw the real photos of my mother, the brainwashing suddenly broke. That's when I decided to sue you, capturing evidence if you actually demanding an exorbitant amount of money. You betrayed me. David exclaimed, stunned by my brother's revelation. Don't mess with me. You're the one who kept swindling money from me and my mother. You brainwashed us, telling us not to meet my sister and even made us lie that you were our stepfather. My mother died without seeing my sister for years. I'll not only get back the money you took from me, but also the money you took from my mother. You've sucked money from us and enjoyed yourself. Now suffer misfortune. My brother angrily confronted David with such intensity that David stumbled back in surprise. Then we'll see you in court, Robert said, and we left the scene. After that, James sued David under Robert's legal representation. David was ordered to pay back the total amount of $300,000 that he had swindled from my brother and mother. Not only was David ordered to pay compensation, but his outrageous fraudulence became known to his previous patients and their families, and he seems to be in serious trouble due to lawsuits and compensation claims from many people. He had been doing as he pleased for so long that he deserved to be punished. I realized that our relationship had been strained because of the brainwashing, and with everything resolved, the resentment between my brother and me disappeared. My brother also attended my wedding with Robert. I hadn't seen my brother for many years because of David, but now I want to fill that gap by regularly meeting and getting along well with my only sibling.
Please make sure to pay back the loan, okay? While I was at work, I got a sudden email. When I quickly called Greg, he calmly said, "Sorry, but I've fallen for someone else. I'm starting a new life with her." And he wanted to take the fancy car we recently bought with a loan in my name. Even though I tried to stop him, my husband ignored me, hung up suddenly, and then I couldn't reach him. In the end, Greg left with his new partner, and now I have a big debt. As a mom to our 10-year-old son, I never thought something so unfair would happen. I feel really lost. Feeling lost and not knowing what to do. I'm 35 years old and my name is Hannah. My husband Greg is the same age, and we have a family of 3, including our 10-year-old son Ryan. Ryan is really smart, even from a young age, reading things on the computer and asking for my thoughts on them. Even though the topics are confusing, I'm always amazed by his intelligence. Unlike Ryan, Greg hasn't had a steady job. I work full-time and worry about our future. Recently though, Greg held the same job for 3 years and earned a stable income. Around that time, he talked about making memories as a family, and we decided to buy a $35,000 camper van. Since Greg couldn't get the loan in his name, I ended up taking it. On the day the camper van was supposed to arrive, I got an unexpected email from Greg, saying, "I'll take the delivered camper van gracefully. Since the loan is in your name, you'll handle the repayments." I called my husband right away, not understanding what the email meant. "What's that email about?" while I was at work. "Well, I've fallen in love with another woman and decided to date her." "What? What are you talking about? I thought it would be just a short thing, but it got serious. So I'm thinking of starting a new life with her. Bye. Remember those divorce papers I prepared after our fight? I'll file them," he said, and then abruptly ended the call. This was the first time I realized Greg betrayed me, and it was really shocking. After that, Greg didn't answer my calls no matter how many times I tried. I wondered, can something like this really happen? When I came home from work and looked in the drawer where the divorce papers should be, they were already gone, so I was stuck with a big debt from a $35,000 car loan. Despite trying to reach Greg through emails and calls, he never replied. Ryan noticed something was off with me and came to check on me after dinner. "Mom, what's wrong? You haven't been eating much lately. Are you okay?" Yeah, maybe I'm just tired." When people lie, they look up to the right. Lying is bad. I've noticed Dad hasn't been home for 3 days, right? Surprised by Ryan's keen words, I took a deep breath and decided to tell him everything since I couldn't hide the truth anymore. "I get it. Dad tends to do things like that. Are you feeling sad?" "No, I kind of saw it coming with how things were." Ryan, like he could predict the future, seemed not bothered by our parents' divorce, but deep down, I knew he must be sad. While silently apologizing to Ryan in my thoughts, I worked really hard, trying not to think about the bad stuff. However, my body was honest and my health got worse over time. There was a training session at work that day, but I couldn't stand up and ended up sitting down. "Sorry, I can't stand up right now. I need to take a break." I heard my colleagues worried about me, but I couldn't respond and just collapsed. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. The doctor said I needed more tests, so they kept me in the hospital. I thought, I feel so weak. It's just supposed to be stress. Tears started flowing when I looked at the IV in my arm and the hospital room ceiling. At that moment, Ryan, usually calm, rushed in looking really worried. I quickly wiped away my tears. "Mom, what happened? Is it serious? You're not going to die, right?" No, I wouldn't leave you alone." "Phew, that's good. The school called, saying you were taken to the hospital." I was so shocked. Ryan is usually mature, but he's still just 10. I promised myself to get better for him, but my health was worse than I thought, and the doctor said I had a serious illness. The doctor said, you should have surgery as soon as possible. Please decide quickly. So I had the surgery. When I left the hospital, it had been a month since Greg left. When I got home and checked the mailbox, there was a letter asking for the car loan payment. I thought the money should have been taken from my account automatically. What happened? Panicking, I looked at my cash card balance, which was supposed to be $20,000, but it was only $33.90 now. I thought Greg must have done this. I want to ask him to give the money back, but I can't reach him. What should I do? I can't sell the camper van since I don't have it. After Greg left, everything started going wrong, and my mood got even worse. Seeing me upset about all these problems, Ryan touched my forehead. You look pale. Are you feeling sick again? You don't have a fever though. Physically, I'm okay, but your dad not only took the car but also all our saved money. I can't work yet because of my health, and now we have no money. I don't know what to do. I get it. Then I'll deliver newspapers and I'll check the internet for any jobs I can do. Feeling encouraged by my 10-year-old son, I told myself it's not the time to be sad. Sorry for making you worry. I can't be weak. I'll change my thinking and try to do whatever I can. Smiling at him, Ryan smiled back and then said something surprising. Let's figure out how to get the car back from Dad. How can we do that? The camper van is in your name, right? Yes. But so what? Then let's check on my phone. A month ago, when we went hiking as a family, surprisingly Ryan, who is usually very reliable, got lost. At that time, we bought a kid's cell phone on Ryan's suggestion and installed a GPS app on it, which both Greg and I could use. With this app, I can see where Dad is in real time, and he's been moving around a lot. Oh really? But what if we find him, and he just gives a vague answer and runs away again? As I thought about this, Ryan smiled and made an interesting suggestion. Don't worry, I've already taken precautions. What? What did you just say? To my surprise, Ryan had done something amazing on his own while I was in the hospital. I thought, I can't believe such a smart child came from me. Understanding Ryan's words, I was just amazed. He even found out about Greg's girlfriend. Okay, let's show Dad, who betrayed us, a lesson. Sure, let's start the plan now. Together, my son and I got ready for that moment. I thought, with Ryan beside me, I can handle anything. Bring it on, anywhere, anytime. Then 3 days later, my phone rang. Ah, it's me. Please, I need your help. Oh, who might this be? Don't act like you don't know. It's your husband, obviously. I'm being questioned by the police about you. They might ask me to come to the police station. Help me out. Oh, really? Just wait a moment then. I quickly went with my son to where Greg was, and to my surprise, it was a forest park near our house where camping was allowed. Greg was being questioned by the police in front of his car, looking confused. Feeling sorry for him, I sighed and talked to the police. We need to talk as a couple, and I asked them to come back for a while. Greg looked uncomfortable with people watching, so he hurried Ryan and me into the car. Inside, Greg's girlfriend was sitting, glaring at us, but that didn't matter anymore. Sorry about that. Thanks for coming, but why did the police show up at my place? I don't get it. That's because I reported the missing camper van. What? Why would you do that? It's obvious, right? My car was stolen. Greg, thinking that actions between spouses can't be criminal, was saying confusing things, but the world isn't that simple. You filed for divorce, remember? Forgot. So we are strangers now, and you're driving a stranger's car without permission. That's a crime. Ryan figured all this out, as sharp as ever, that kid. But I didn't steal the car. I just borrowed it for a bit. Oh, really? Well, I need my car now, so can you get it back? That would be really helpful. I reached out my hand to get the keys from Greg, and he reluctantly handed them over after checking it was returned. Ryan quietly spoke up. Hey, why did you leave your family and choose to be with this woman? Caught off guard by his son's unexpected question, Greg was confused and awkwardly scratched his head. Seeing this, Greg's girlfriend chuckled smugly and started talking. It's because I'm more attractive than your mom. Look at me, you can see it, right? He fell for me and decided to leave his family. Quiet. I didn't ask you, old lady. Dad, you answer. Mandy quieted down when Ryan spoke firmly, but Greg stayed silent. If you can't explain, that's okay. I'll just call the police back and have them arrest you. Wait, hang on. Okay, I'll talk. It turns out Mandy joined Greg's company 3 months ago. They liked each other and got together at the welcome party for new employees. Later, they found out Mandy was pregnant, and Greg decided to start a new life with her, leaving us behind. And why did you take the camper van? I quit my job and was thinking of selling the car for money, but it looks like you were using it a lot, right? I thought it would be a waste to sell it right away, so we planned to go on a trip. Wait, how do you know all this? Remember when Ryan got lost? After that, as a precaution, we bought him a kid's cell phone and installed a GPS app. Did you forget? We put it on your phone too, so I knew where you were all this time. By the way, I later found out from Ryan that he pretended to get lost during our family hike because he wanted a cell phone. I was amazed at Ryan's ability to think and act so smartly. I thought something was wrong with Dad, so I made this plan to keep an eye on him. You're really a scary kid. I never want to become an adult like you, Dad, who betrays important people without thinking. Greg, faced with the tough truth Ryan told, couldn't say anything back. On the other hand, seeing Ryan, just 10 years old but able to think and speak strongly, gave me a sense of strength as a mom. I felt like I couldn't lose, especially in making things right. Also, give back the $20,000 you took from my account now. That was our shared money as a couple. You should return it. No, it's not. That money was what I saved bit by bit since I was single. You often quit your jobs, so we didn't save much money together, did we? I was shocked to hear that Greg and his girlfriend wasted the $20,000. It was the moment I felt glad about getting a divorce. So that's how it is. But if you took the car and my money without permission, that's a serious crime. I just sent the police away, so it's not their business anymore, right? I've only said we would talk. I'm not taking back the complaint. I need to report the theft of my money. Mom, should I call the police now? I can do it with just one button on my phone. Mandy, Greg's girlfriend, had been watching our conversation but quickly tried to leave the camper van. At that moment, she let out a scream that echoed around. The reason was that outside the car door, Mandy's parents were standing there, their faces red with anger about to explode. Startled, she stepped back as her parents yelled at her. I'm sorry. Don't be so mad. But why are your parents here, Mom and Dad? I called them before. What? Why? The truth is, when I was in the hospital, Ryan went to Greg's office and sadly told them, "My dad left the house with a woman we don't know," and my mom collapsed. Seeing Ryan so upset, the people at Greg's office suspected Mandy, who left the company with Greg, and gave Ryan her parents' address. Greg and Mandy were really friendly at the office, and there were pictures of them together at the welcome party for new employees, looking like a couple. After learning from the office people that you commuted from your parents' house, I went there with your photo. Your parents came out when I visited, and then I told them everything that had happened. So today, I called Mandy's parents and asked them to wait nearby for a while. How could you do this to me? The worst. I don't want to hear that from you. That's my line. By the way, your stomach seems quite big. When is the baby due? In 3 months. What? Hold on. That doesn't match up with when you met my husband. You two only met 3 months ago, right? What's happening? It's not time for the baby to be born yet. Greg, hearing this for the first time, stared at Mandy, eyes wide. Wait, what does that mean? Are you stupid? Don't you get it? It takes about 9 months from getting pregnant to having a baby, which means the child she's carrying isn't yours. You're so foolish. What do you mean, Mandy? Have you been lying to me? I almost got away with it. Can't help it now that I'm caught. You're so gullible. You can't see through lies at all. Really a fool? Don't mock me. My whole life is ruined because of you. What were you thinking? Greg and Mandy started arguing, but nobody stopped them, letting them work it out. Meanwhile, we called the police again to explain the situation. As it started to get dark, the forest park was lit up by the red lights of the police cars. No, really, I messed up. I was truly wrong. I'm sorry. I'll work hard and never cheat again, so please just don't arrest me, Dad. People don't change that easily, especially lazy people like you. Exactly, Ryan's right. I can't trust you at all. Think about what you did and face the consequences at the police station. If I get arrested, I won't be able to pay back the money. Is that okay with you? I don't mind. Pay me back after you've made up for your mistakes. Take your time, don't worry. I've already found you a job. Let's see, there's Ryan's child support, plus the $20,000 you stole from me. I'm not sure how much it will all add up to, but you'll work and pay it all back. I had one last thing to say to Mandy, the girlfriend. You might think you're just watching, but don't forget you're part of Greg's theft. Be ready for that. When I said that Mandy would have to pay if Greg couldn't return the stolen money, she got scared. Mandy asked her parents for help, but they refused, saying, "We disown a daughter who causes trouble for others." So Greg and Mandy got taken away in a police car because of what they did. Thanks to Ryan's smart plan, we were able to make sure Greg and Mandy faced consequences. Even though they were let go from jail soon after, they had to pay me a lot of money. I, with the help of a lawyer, asked for $20,000 as compensation. Also, I made Greg agree to pay $500 every month for Ryan's support. I helped Greg find a job in a factory connected to the company where I work. The money he owes me, along with other charges, will be taken from his salary and put into my account. I also sold the camper van and got rid of the car loan. Since then, I've become much healthier and am doing well at my job. Ryan has been helping a lot with chores and tasks around the house. I want to keep going strong so that Ryan can follow his dreams without giving up.
Mary, it's me, he said, his voice a ghost from the past. It had been a decade since my ex-husband and our son's wife vanished into thin air after eloping. I'd buried thoughts of them deep within, avoiding the pain they left behind. But now, unexpectedly, his voice pierced through the years. "I'm going to move into your parents' place. You're still there, aren't you?" His demand was as startling as it was unwelcome. "I'm sorry for the abruptness, but you need to vacate my home," he insisted, leaving no room for negotiation. His request caught me off guard. A decade had passed since we last exchanged words, and his sudden reappearance left me bewildered. What could he possibly want now, after all this time? And why was he asking to move into my parents' home with his unfaithful partner? Still bunking with the folks, huh? Any new spouses since we last talked? His inquiry dripped with a mix of curiosity and condescension. Get out of there, pronto. Anger surged within me for the first time in a decade, fueled by his audacity to mock me further. Little did he know, my living arrangements had changed drastically over the years. "Sorry, but if you're eyeing my parents' place, you're out of luck," I retorted. "Huh?" His confusion was palpable, a stark contrast to the rage boiling within me. I made it clear to him that after a decade, my determination had only grown stronger. Mary Kane, 60 years old, and still teaching part-time at a private school, I asserted. Despite being at retirement age, I persisted with my part-time work, albeit with a reduced salary. My admiration for my parents, both esteemed educators, stemmed from cherished memories of my childhood. Their influence fueled my ambition to follow in their footsteps. There was a time when I had a husband, Stephen, but that chapter ended in divorce a decade ago, and now, out of the blue, he resurfaced after all these years of estrangement. Stephen and I first crossed paths in college, back when I was just 21, juggling part-time teaching at a tutoring center with my studies in education. Stephen, a fresh face at the tutoring center, had recently stepped into the role of a part-time teacher. Despite his seniority in years, it fell upon me with my longer tenure to mentor him as directed by the center's director. As I guided him through the ropes, our camaraderie blossomed into a close friendship, which eventually bloomed into something more. 3 years of courtship later, we exchanged vows and welcomed our son, Michael, into the world. With graduation came a full-time teaching position for me, prompting my departure from the tutoring center. Our journey together as a family was just unfolding, filled with promises of a bright future. 25 years flew by, witnessing Michael find love in Sarah, whom he'd met during his studies at a design school in New York. We rejoiced in their union, hopeful for the happiness they would build together as a couple. Then, unexpectedly, Michael returned home, burdened with something he needed to share. "Mom, you're still married to Dad, right?" His question, though seemingly innocuous, stirred a mix of emotions within me as I welcomed him back, the worry beginning to settle in. I spotted Dad strolling through Brooklyn with Sarah, Michael disclosed. "Okay," I replied, my mind racing with disbelief. According to Michael, he caught sight of Sarah and Dad arm in arm last Friday night in Brooklyn's bustling hotel district. Suspicion gripped him, prompting him to tail them discreetly. His surveillance led him to witness them disappear into a hotel. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Despite being in-laws, Stephen and Sarah shared a bond akin to that of a father and daughter. The notion of them meeting privately, let alone in a hotel, seemed unfathomable. I clung to the hope that it was a misunderstanding or a nightmare, but Michael's evidence shattered that illusion. The image on Michael's phone screen depicted a crystal-clear snapshot of Dad and Sarah entering the hotel arm in arm, unmistakably captured on a Friday night. Dad's excuse of overtime at the office crumbled in the face of this damning proof. Additionally, I couldn't shake off the memory of Stephen's frequent late arrivals home over the past few months. His explanations vary from happy hour gatherings with colleagues to sudden business trips or urgent work demands on holidays. Initially, I accepted his excuses without much skepticism, but upon closer reflection, I realized these occurrences had become more frequent lately. There seemed to be a pattern emerging, one that made me increasingly uneasy. Could these excuses be a cover for spending more time with Sarah? Requesting Michael to forward the image, I assured him I would confront his father before bidding him good night. Anticipation gnawed at me as I awaited Stephen's return home that evening. When he finally arrived, the scent of alcohol clung to him, aggravating my nerves. Summoning my courage, I approached him directly. "Stephen, Michael mentioned something today. Did you meet Sarah last Friday?" Yeah," he stammered, his response lacking conviction. "We did cross paths briefly. We chatted a bit, I think." His sudden alertness and the shift in his gaze didn't escape my notice. Sensing my apprehension, he countered with a question of his own. "What exactly did he tell you?" "He mentioned spotting you and Sarah entering a hotel in Brooklyn," I disclosed, my voice tinged with concern. As I spoke, I held up the picture Michael had given me. Stephen's reaction was immediate. His eyes widened, and he seemed to choke on his words, his gaze darting around as if seeking an escape. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he seemed to resign himself to the truth. "I can't believe Michael caught us," he muttered, his tone a mixture of surprise and resignation. "I let myself get carried away. It's unforgivable." My heart sank as his admission sank in. "No way, Stephen," I whispered, struggling to comprehend the betrayal. Realizing there was no use in denying it any longer, Stephen began to spill everything. He confessed to starting a relationship with Sarah 6 months prior, swayed by her advances and feelings that now eclipsed those for me. My mind reeled at the revelation. Had their affair begun around the time Michael and Sarah celebrated their 3rd anniversary? Despite my trembling shock, Stephen pressed on with his confession. "I want to marry Sarah, Mary. I'm filing for divorce," he declared, his words like a dagger to my already shattered heart. I objected vehemently, my mind spinning with disbelief, but Stephen remained resolute. "I can't continue like this. It's over between us." The following day, Stephen failed to return home. His absence was accompanied by a notable absence of his belongings and a finalized divorce decree left on the table. Later, a distraught call from Michael revealed that Sarah had disappeared, taking the divorce papers with her. It seemed she had no intention of coming back. The shock of Stephen and Sarah's sudden elopement left me reeling. That marked the end of my marriage to Stephen a decade ago. After the divorce, we sold our shared home, and I found solace in a new residence closer to my workplace. Initially, the loneliness of my new surroundings weighed heavily on me. Yet, as I immersed myself in my work, I gradually discovered that time had mended my emotional wounds. Teaching proved to be a powerful balm for my emotional wounds, a fact I only realized with hindsight. The steadfast dedication to my fulfilling career played a pivotal role in my healing journey. Continuing to work part-time at the school even after retirement, I found purpose and joy in the daily interactions with both colleagues and students. With each passing day, the weight of Stephen and Sarah's betrayal diminished, replaced by the gratification of nurturing young minds. 10 years on, thoughts of Stephen faded into the background of my life. While my income saw a decline after transitioning to part-time teaching, it remained sufficient for me to stay engaged with the school and the students who held me in high regard. Their affection and admiration filled a void akin to that of a parent. Additionally, I found solace in Michael's resilience, witnessing him throw himself into his work with renewed vigor, having overcome the initial shock of his father's and wife's betrayal. Any semblance of peace I had managed to find shattered with the shrill ring of the phone. "Hello, Mary, it's Stephen." His voice pierced the silence, breaking a 10-year hiatus. I never anticipated hearing his voice again, and when I did, a surge of emotions overwhelmed me. "What's the purpose of this call? You didn't reach out to reminisce about the past, did you?" My words tumbled out with more force than I intended, fueled by years of pent-up resentment. After all, it was Stephen who had insisted on the divorce, leaving me to pick up the pieces. Stephen, ever composed and seemingly indifferent, countered, "Come on now, what's the point of this? Why did you even bother contacting me? You're the reason we're no longer together. I've moved on, Mary. You're not my husband anymore, and I have no interest in seeing you or hearing your voice. Let's cut to the chase, Mary. You're back at your parents', right?" His casual interruption grated on my already frayed nerves, prompting me to raise my voice once more, struggling to contain the surge of emotions stirred by his insensitive and light-hearted tone. Stephen pressed on, oblivious to my turmoil. "Sarah's expecting," he announced, the news hitting me like a freight train. "But raising the child is proving more financially challenging than we anticipated. Making ends meet has become increasingly difficult." According to his account, despite the significant age gap of 30 years, he and Sarah had shared a passionate bond. However, the dynamics shifted when Sarah fell pregnant last year, upending their lives. Both Stephen and Sarah had quit their jobs ahead of the due date, only to find themselves struggling to secure new employment. Forced to scrape by with part-time work, they faced mounting financial strain. With Sarah unable to work following the birth, their precarious financial situation loomed large. I reached out to Michael and my parents for help, but they all refused. Stephen chuckled over the phone, his words carrying the bitter edge. "Stubborn lot, aren't they?" His laughter echoed in my mind, conjuring images of Stephen's stern father, determined mother, and sullen younger brother, faces I hadn't seen since their wedding 13 years ago. His family, a portrait of strictness, resolve, and seriousness, had cut ties with me after the divorce. Yet, despite our estrangement, I never imagined Stephen as the type to tolerate infidelity or betrayal within his own family. "So, what? You expect me to stay in our old house?" I said yes, but first prioritize your relationship with your wife. Your eldest daughter and first grandchild should take precedence over a mere teacher. Leave now. His abusive tone ignited a fierce anger within me. Had my memories of Stephen over the past decade been too idealized? I hadn't anticipated this callousness from him. Then a realization dawned on me. In a subdued voice, I uttered, "I'm sorry, but if you're referring to my parents' house, it's no longer ours." "What do you mean?" Stephen's confusion mirrored my own until I clarified. "Both my parents passed away. Dad 3 years ago, Mom just last year. Their house became too much for me to manage alone, so I sold it. I don't have a house to offer you, Stephen." "Ha. I won't disclose my current address, and even if I did, you're not welcome here. Don't ever show up." Stephen's voice boomed with authority. "What about my inheritance? When your parents pass, should the family home and money come to me?" I frowned, angered by Stephen's cold calculations regarding my parents' demise. It was evident he had his eyes set on not only my funds but also my parents' estate. Despite his mention of familial ties, it was too late for any semblance of trust. I had already received my rightful share from my parents' estate, including their house. My parents had made it clear they wouldn't leave a single cent to a man who shamelessly eloped with their daughter-in-law a decade ago. On the day of our divorce, they were incensed upon learning of Stephen and Sarah's betrayal from Michael and me. Their fury was justified. They had treated Stephen like their own son, only to be repaid with the gravest betrayal. Before their passing, my parents took proactive steps to secure their estate, drafting a will to ensure everything, including our family home, would pass on to me in the event of Sarah's return. 7 years after my father's demise, my mother followed, leaving me the sole inheritor of our family's estate. While reluctant to part with the cherished memories embedded in our home, I honored my parents' wishes and decided to sell it. They hoped it would shelter someone more deserving than Stephen and Sarah. Stephen's reaction was explosive upon learning of this decision. "Don't play dumb. You can't. This is absurd. They wouldn't approve." The inheritance was legally passed down to me, I countered firmly, and their forgiveness isn't something I seek, especially not from Stephen and Sarah, who've done nothing but cause turmoil. Stephen, who had idled away his days, had no business meddling in my affairs. As I gazed at my disconnected phone, I realized Stephen's true colors. Someone who would abandon others for his own gain, then lash out when denied. It was a revelation that my ex-husband, with whom I'd shared years of my life, could be so immature. As contempt simmered in my heart, another call came through, this time from Sarah. You didn't bother to inform me about my own in-laws passing, she accused, her voice dripping with accusation. But her words failed to move me. If Sarah had truly been shocked by my parents' deaths, she would have expressed condolences or a desire to pay her respects. Instead, she immediately steered the conversation towards inheritance, legacy, and money, revealing her true priorities. Neither Sarah nor Stephen deserved a place before my parents' altar. With that thought in mind, I cut Sarah off before she could finish speaking. Later, I received a call from Michael. "Mom, did Dad and Sarah show up at your place?" he inquired. "No, they didn't, but they called, asking about the house and their inheritance," I replied. Michael's voice carried a hint of resignation. "I see. I thought they might reach out, especially after they visited me the other day." "Michael, are you okay? Did they cause any trouble?" I asked, concerned. "I'm fine, Mom, really. They just made a scene at my door. When I threatened to call the police, they took off. But I have an idea." Michael revealed his plan to me, prompting a decision to break the cycle of toxicity between Stephen and Sarah. Not just for my own sake, but to safeguard my son as he embarked on a fresh chapter. A few days after putting this plan into action, I received a frantic call from Stephen. "Mary, did you have a hand in this? You're unusually quiet," he blurted out. "Don't play innocent. What's going on?" I demanded. "They're on their way to our place," Stephen disclosed. "They? Who?" I pressed for clarification. Stephen explained that 7 women were en route to their apartment, his unfaithful partners. It appeared he'd been carrying on affairs with 7 other women, in addition to Sarah. Unaware of Stephen's infidelities with 7 other women, Sarah found herself caught off guard by the sudden chaos. As the women erupted in anger, Stephen's frustration grew, directed now at Sarah. The revelation of multiple affairs left me dumbfounded. "I knew it was you. How did you uncover my secret?" Stephen demanded. "I wonder," I retorted, "considering I have nothing left after my ex-husband abandoned me for another woman 10 years ago." "What?" Stephen's shock was palpable. Turning the conversation around, Stephen unleashed a torrent of expletives over the phone, but his outburst failed to faze me in the slightest. As Sarah's distress escalated during our conversation, she hastily packed her belongings, unleashing a heated argument with Stephen, oblivious to my presence on the line. It was a chaotic scene unfolding before my ears, reminding me of the saying, "Things spiral out of control." With a heavy heart, I directed my final words to my ex-husband, though they may have fallen on deaf ears. "Farewell, Stephen. Never darken my doorstep or our son's life again." With that, I ended the call. Little did Stephen know, the tumult sparked by the women he had been unfaithful with was the very plan Michael had alluded to. After Stephen and Sarah's tumultuous visit to Michael's home, where they were swiftly turned away, he wasted no time in enlisting the services of a professional detective agency to delve deeper into their affairs. As it turned out, Stephen's infidelity with Sarah had escalated into affairs with 7 other women, 3 of whom were married. Michael promptly relayed this information to me, along with Stephen and Sarah's current address, the very apartment uncovered by the detective agency. With this knowledge in hand, Michael and I coordinated a plan. We informed all 7 women of Stephen and Sarah's whereabouts and directed them to confront the couple simultaneously. The resulting chaos at Stephen and Sarah's apartment grew so intense that law enforcement had to intervene, dispatching police to the scene. Sarah ended her relationship with Stephen, and he found himself facing lawsuits from 3 aggrieved husbands, each demanding alimony payments exceeding 3 figures. Losing Sarah, his home, and his financial stability, Stephen now lives as a homeless individual in a park, struggling to make ends meet. A colleague spotted him seeking assistance at a soup kitchen. Meanwhile, Sarah, facing her own financial burdens, was hit with alimony demands surpassing 3 figures. Forced to borrow money to cover her expenses, she turned to a black market lender, a decision that would soon prove ominous. Shortly after securing the loan, she was forcibly abducted by intimidating individuals in a car, and her whereabouts remain unknown. 10 years have passed, and I've finally reached a final resolution with Stephen. Once again, I've returned to the tranquility of my life. While I remain single, contentment fills me as I immerse myself in the vibrant atmosphere of school. That alone is sufficient for me. In time, Michael found love with a woman who has a child of her own. They are now dating with the intention of marriage. My heart swells with hope that Michael, too, will discover a newfound joy and purpose in life.